I was reading this book this morning. It was a book by Brian Cox, a physicist, on Einstein's equation E equals mc squared, which isn't actually relevant, but I came across this phrase, to whet your appetite. Whet your appetite. And when I read this phrase, I had this weird cognitive shift inside my head, which I think is just, well, I just spend a minute or two thinking about. Because I've used that phrase many times. I don't think I've ever written that phrase down, but I have said it out loud, and I must have read it dozens and dozens of times before in the past. But I think when I've used it myself, or when I've heard it spoken, I've always had a particular way of understanding it. Because on the face of it, it's a strange phrase, whet your appetite. It's an odd one. So something must be going on for me, allow me to understand it, and I think it's a metaphorical understanding. Well, I know it's a metaphorical understanding, but I think this cognitive shift I felt this morning was the shift of a metaphor changing its structure. Because when I've heard it in the past, even though I know that it's spelled W-H-E-T, the word wet in that sense, what you have to, I kind of know, and if anybody asked me, I would have said I know it's spelled W-H-E-T. I kind of only know that intellectually. I didn't really feel that spelling, or I've never brought it to consciousness, certainly. So I've always heard it as W-E-T, wet your appetite. And my understanding of the phrase, my ability to make sense of it, I think, has been drawing on the W-E-T spelling. So when I've heard the phrase whet your appetite, what's gone on in my mind, I think, and it's all non-conscious, so I have to speculate a bit here. I think what's been going on until this morning is that it's a sense of something being wetted, something being dampened or moistened. You know, and that dampening or moistening being a kind of preparatory process. You know, in the way that if you're making, I don't know, if you're planning to do something with clay, you might sprinkle clay on it. You might sprinkle water on it, beg your pardon, to soften it a wee bit. Or if the ground's really hard and you need to do some planting, you have to wait for it to rain, so the ground's softened up in preparation for your, you know, if you're digging it over or planting something in it, something like that. So I've always heard this. So the metaphor I think I've been deploying to aid my understanding of the phrase has been this preparation, dampening, moistening metaphor. Come on, Figs, this way. But of course it's not what it is. It's not W-E-T, it's W-H-E-T, whet your appetite, which is a completely different meaning. It means to sharpen. A whetstone is one of those stones that people used to use to sharpen blades on, knives on, that kind of thing. So when you whet your appetite, it's nothing to do with moistening and softening up and preparing. It's to do with putting an edge on, or working a tool so that it functions better, or making a surgical instrument more optimal, so that it will make finer distinctions and be able to operate in a more clean and less undifferentiated way. It has those kind of understandings to it, which is completely different. But yeah, I suppose the only thing that I found interesting about this is that, you know, I kind of felt this happen when I read the phrase. It didn't pass seamlessly through my cognitive system, with these metaphors kind of being mobilized in the kind of backstage area of my mind and helping me to understand it. I felt the metaphor shift from a softening, moistening metaphor to a sharpening, blade metaphor. That's all I've got to say, really.